Hardly had Clarence finished asking me if I would be prepared to go to Spain, I was saying, yes, I'll go. When do I set off? How do I get there? I was wild with excitement. I was going to Spain. I was going to fight for democracy. I was going to fight against fascism.
That's all I come for, the kisses.
Here they come, here they come.
We went to Dublin last year for the AGM, were you there?
No, I wasn't.
The reason why I decided to organise an event of this sort was that in 2001 I went to Spain to retrace the route that my father had taken when he was fighting with the machine gun company. And it was at that time that I thought it would be a good idea to do a commemorative walk across the Pyrenees.
Don't you find it strange, I remark, that this war is celebrated mainly by the defeated? My colleague reacts sharply. What do you mean? Have you forgotten that in Spain, for 40 years, the defeated dared not even mourn in public? We heard only the victor's version. Of course, he's Spanish. I'm British, and a generation older. Will these differences affect our filming? For the next few days, we'll be together with this party now heading for the Pyrenees to walk in remembrance of the International Brigades. How will it all turn out? I tried to explain to him my version. 1936. Britain still holds down an empire. No one can know yet that it will go to war against Nazi Germany. Some say communism is a bigger threat. There is a simmering debate into which Spain erupts. So what were the events there which fired such passions and sent foreigners to fight in Spain? I'm oppressed by all that has been written then and since. How can we say anything briefly which is roughly true when arguments still rage and books on the subject fill an entire room? I suggest a sparse chronology. Starting is a problem, and we opt for 1931, when Spain becomes a republic for the second time. We skip 5 eventful years. In February 1936, there are elections in which the Popular Front, a left alliance, beats rightist parties by a narrow margin. The Left's programme includes land redistribution and some autonomy for Basques and Catalans. July 1936. Army officers stage a coup. They take over a third of Spain. Elsewhere they fail. The civil war begins. Both sides need arms. By international law, the Republic, the legitimate state, should be free to purchase them. Around the world, there is popular sympathy for the Republic, and individual foreigners travel there to offer help. The rebels, who call themselves nationalists, also attract some individual supporters abroad. But far more important is that they obtain the backing of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. By early August, German planes are flying rebel troops from Morocco to the Spanish front. The major powers sign a non-intervention agreement, treating the government and the rebel generals as equal. It is promoted by Britain and overseen by a committee with no means to enforce compliance. German and Italian aid flows openly to the rebels. In September, the rebels appoint as leader General Francisco Franco. The Republic turns to the Soviet Union. In October, Soviet arms begin to arrive. Communist parties recruit for the International Brigades, volunteer units within the Spanish army. From over 50 countries, around 35,000 foreigners join. Not by any means all communists. The brigades are roughly organised by nationality, but include some Spanish volunteers too. In most democratic countries, there are solidarity movements which collect food and medical supplies for the Republic, lobby and demonstrate for democratic Spain. The war is long. Casualties are high, both military and civilian. Slowly, the nationalists gain ground. In October 1938, the International Brigades are withdrawn. The Republic tries and fails to negotiate a settlement. 1st of April 1939, Franco announces the end of the war. A stream of refugees struggle to reach France, and France will fall to the Nazis little more than 1 year later. How were those lives and deaths processed into history? At school, we learnt something of the Civil War, Picasso's Guernica, poets of the 30s. Death? Very well. I accept. For I am your choice, your decision. Yes, I am Spain. Echoes of mythic drama, far away and long ago. How different it seemed when my parents spoke of Franco as a living dictator still oppressing Spain. And from them, I heard that many of the British who fought in Spain first confronted fascists here in British towns, most famously in London on Cable Street.
And I remember it very well, my parents telling me about it. This was 1936, 3 years after Hitler had come to power. The idea of Mosley in uniform trying to march through the Jewish East End, of course, had an enormous resonance.
Here too, an anniversary is being marked. We go because I know there's a connection, but we are delighted to find there the banner of the International Brigades.
But sadly, none of our brigades are able to come today. And I can remember somebody telling me once there was a huge rally and Sir Oswald Mosley put his hand up in the sort of fascist salute and wanting silence. And as soon as there was silence, somebody said, "Yes, all right, you can go to the lavatory." We have to keep on remembering what went on all those years ago because there are elements of it now, and it's just as important to fight fascism now as it was then.
The Labour movement as a whole decided that they wouldn't allow Mosley to march to the Jewish quarter. And this helped to build a unity amongst all sections of people in the struggle against fascism. And the explanation that we gave was the battle in Spain, what was happening at that time.
This inspired them, I think. Cable Street inspired a lot of people to go to Spain who might not otherwise have gone.
Very nice planet.
The National Front tried again here in the early 1970s, and again we had to stop them. And there have been many occasions the Anti-Nazi League and United Against Fascism and other anti-racist and anti-fascist groups have had to organise over and over again, and we will have to go on doing it. We will have to go on doing it against the National Front, the BNP or whatever. So I would like to think that many of us are trying to carry on that tradition, and that I have inherited that tradition from Cable Street. Friends, comrades, Haverim, enjoy yourselves today. One of those rare moments on the left where we're actually going to enjoy ourselves.
It was autumn, just after the events of Cable Street, when the first British volunteers for the International Brigades left England on the slow journey towards the battlefields of Spain.
Recent events had thrust the country and its people to the forefront of our political consciousness. Well, I determined to go to Spain myself. I had no wish for heroism, nor did I think Spain would live or die on my decision. I just knew I had to go. In truth, I think emotion, rather than cold reason, determines the moment of decision.
Looking back now at the summer of 1936, it's astonishing how little I knew of Spain. The actual causes of the outbreak of a civil war were barely obvious to me, except in terms of a broadest generality. The fascists are trying to kill a democracy. In my ignorance, I was probably typical of the average British working class man, and yet, despite the widespread lack of knowledge of Spain, I cannot recall any other international or domestic political issue having such an explosive impact upon the British working class as that produced by the Spanish Civil War.
Now you can leave London by train and reach the Pyrenees the same day. By air, the journey lasts a couple of hours. Either to the French or the Spanish side, it hardly matters now. The frontier is little more than a symbolic line. In the first months of the war, volunteers faced only bureaucratic hurdles and could travel openly by train or road. One of the main routes would bring them here to the border post of Portbou, now a small resort where tourists come to enjoy the sea and the nearby mountain scenery. Early in 1937, the French stopped the flow of aid to Spain, and then volunteers for the brigades had to cross in secret, taking smugglers' trails over the Pyrenees. They were not looking for romantic views and chose the lowest paths which would bypass the frontier patrols. Our commemorative party will do the same. We will be met by representatives of Spanish organisations and mayors of local villages. They will make us welcome, but we are curious to know what will other villagers think. Does anyone remember the strangers arriving from across the mountains?
Había las brigadas internacionales. Las conocía de habernos encontrado a veces ellos marcando aquí, por ejemplo, y nosotros por los lados. Pero después pasaban por aquí también, Todos los franceses e ingleses y eso pasaban por aquí por la noche, pasaban por la montaña. y entonces de aquí los llevaban abajo para ir al frente. Eso sí que me acuerdo, porque yo aún no había tenido que salir.
¿Y se acuerda de verlos pasar?
Sí, no, pasaban aquí a veces 15 o 20 o 25 o 30 y cantando la Internacional. Entonces en Figueras o en Gerona, yo no sé, allí los distribuían y formaron allí las brigadas internacionales.
Listening to this later, I question the singing, but my colleague points out that the Internationale was one song they would all know and hope the villagers would recognise. Other people we meet have stories to tell about local experiences of the war, but the International Brigades play only a small role in them.
Y después, al cabo de un tiempo, a Francesc Ballester lo dejan.
Miguel Giraud, formerly mayor of the frontier village of La Vajol, offers visitors history tours centred on the Civil War.
Había una carta muy bonita que escribía Lluís Companys a su segunda esposa, y la Carme Ballester le escribe otra carta a él. Y en estas dos cartas que se ve el cariño que se tienen estas dos personas, por eso nosotros le hemos llamado la Font de l'Amor, la fuente del amor.
Is this a service to tourism or to social memory? What would the difference be?
Este es un sitio, y nosotros en vez de llamarle la Plaza de la Lletra Cancanta, tal como está inscrita, la llamamos la Plaza del Monumento. ¿Por qué? Porque hay muchos recuerdos aquí, como por ejemplo la placa de la Mictal de Mauthausen. Luego, como este pueblo fue eminentemente de trabajadores de minas de talco, también hicimos un recuerdo, tal como dice allí, homenaje al minero. Durante más de 100 años, más de 100 familias han vivido de la extracción del talco. Ahora, actualmente, todas están cerradas y el talco nos viene de la China. O sea, entonces hay otro monumento al minero, tal como he dicho. Hay un recordatorio a los republicanos mayormente que pasaron por este sitio, porque concretamente el mes de enero y febrero del 1939 estos campos alrededor de todo el pueblo estaban llenos de gente que venían para pasar al exilio. El gobierno catalán se encontraba en el Mas Perxés a Guyana y en el Mas Barris, que luego si quieres podemos verlo aunque sea desde lejos, es donde había el gobierno español. Habían convenido que el día 5 de febrero del 39 los tres gobiernos saldrían todos hacia el exilio. Nosotros en este pueblo presumimos de algo que no pueden presumir otros pueblos, porque hemos tenido gobierno vasco, gobierno catalán y gobierno estatal español. Por tanto, durante un tiempo este pueblo fue la capital del Estado español y esto no lo puede decir otro pueblo.
The next part of the tour takes us to a talc mine once owned by Miguel's grandfather.
Después hemos ido sabiendo que este edificio estaba destinado, aunque sea muy raro, a ser el Banco de España. ¿Por qué? Porque la moneda española en cierto momento, bueno, la moneda de la República no valía y tenían que comprar armamento a Rusia y otros sitios para ir luchando contra Franco, contra las tropas de Franco. ¿Y qué hacen el gobierno republicano? Se va a toda España, en Montes de Piedad, en iglesias y en casas señoriales, y todo lo que es oro, plata y cuadros de valor están depositados en esta cámara acorazada que les he hablado aquí dentro. Y parece ser que con eso revalorizan la moneda y pueden continuar comprando armamento.
This place seems to stir up personal memories.
Al 5 de febrero del 39, mi padre y mucha gente del pueblo tuvimos que marchar también al exilio por las Illas. Yo tenía solamente 9 años, pero al llegar a las Illas, lo que yo recuerdo siempre que estaba lleno de gente, como aquí en Lavajol, en Darnius y Massanet también, que marchaban hacia el exilio. Lo primero que te encontrabas eran los gendarmes. Ponían los hombres de un lado y las mujeres y crías del otro. Esto no se olvida Porque cuando te quedas solito con tu madre, tengas la edad que tengas, esto no se olvida nunca.
The tour ends in front of a simple monument, almost on the border with France. It commemorates the life and death of Jewish companies. The present of the Generalitat of Catalonia executed after Franco's victory.
No, y además, ¿por qué un hombre elegido democráticamente tienen que asesinarlo en el castillo de Montjuic? Esto nos afecta, esta historia nos afecta. ¿Y por qué se ha de esconder? La televisión catalana mismo hace un reportaje y dice que Lluís Companys sí fue al exilio y que pasó por la Junquera. Y no dice ni que la han asesinado en Montjuic, no dicen nada. Hombre.
Siempre y cuando no haya mucho follón por la tele, sí, que es quien más te puede alterar los nervios, se vive muy bien. Tú haces tu vida, tú respetas la vida de la demás gente y sigues viviendo, sean fascistas o no sean fascistas. Tú has de convivir con ellos, es un continuo. Y no, ya sabes con quién tienes que hablar. Si sabes que es del ramo contrario al tuyo, ya no vas a buscarle y le vas a decir, tú, fascista, no sé qué.
In Agujana, another frontier village, we meet other people from whom the company's monument is a place of special significance.
Mi padre y mi abuelo nos han enseñado que esto es nuestra política, ¿no? Una manera de decir. Nosotros no somos nacionalistas, nosotros somos rojos, somos de izquierda.
Se conoce lo que interesa a ciertas personas, a ciertos escritores, a ciertos historiadores, pero la historia que contamos algunos que las hemos vivido, estas no la escribe nadie. Con 9 años tengo que marcharme al exilio. Después vuelvo. Y cuando voy a la escuela, lo primero que me hacen es cantar el Cara al Sol con la mano así. Y después rezar el Padre Nuestro. Y cuando yo aprendí a hacer 2 y 2, ya había pasado 1 hora. ¿Por qué esto nos ha de conocer? Lo que nos han hecho pasar a nosotros.
The regime Miguel fled sealed its victory with terror. Historians say 150,000, even 200,000 were executed. By then, the world's attention was on the approaching war in Europe. Franco stayed neutral and escaped the purge of fascism which followed. In the Spain my teacher didn't talk about, there was no free press, and Republican supporters were still in prison camps. The dictatorship lasted 40 long years. We have to cross back into France to reach Las Ilias, where we will meet up again with the commemorative party. Maybe it is an illusion, but the French side feels colder, wilder. There were few old houses here. It must have been a remote place in the 1930s, but now much transformed. We meet only incomers, who know no one whose family was here in 1936, no one who might remember the French comrades who helped the brigaders on their way. The main village of Las Ilias looks new, but our meeting place is in an old inn on the far side, where many Republican exiles passed, and where Jewish companies and other government members briefly rested. On the outside, a discreet plaque records their visit. Inside, we find ourselves surrounded by references to other pasts. He starts to film this random clutter. Why? I ask. Because I feel sorry for them, he says, abandoned here as curiosities severed from their meaning. Why hasn't this maze been planted? I mean, who killed this wild boar? Why and when? What has this to do with our story? I ask. But I think I know. It is a warning of what our story should not be.
In this little one.
What we are celebrating is the formation of the International Brigades. It was sometime in October or maybe even early November, because by that time there were lots and lots of people from all over the world going to Spain to fight for the Spanish Republic.
Better with this now. Oh, sorry.
You all remember, of course, James Connolly was a Scotsman.
But Bob Doyle was with Frank Ryan when he was captured.
No, yeah.
Trouble. But you were in San Pedro, weren't you, with Frank, in the concentration, well, the prisoner of war camp?
So you were captured together?
Yeah.
And how long were you in the...
12 months. 11.
Yeah.
I was happy here nearly every year. Since 1954, I got special permission of the Communist Party to come to Spain, only because my wife was Spanish. So I came to, I brought back her mother-in-law.
Well, it's right to keep it going, you know, and keep the memory alive. It was a worthwhile battle. I was then working in the docks. I was a union shop steward. I saw when I went to Spain, I went there as a trade unionist. When I came back from Spain, I had contact with trade unions who were operating in the underground, not only in Spain, but in other countries as well. I used to go and meet representatives of the Spanish trade unions who were then illegal on the Spanish-French border, and we took money and help and information to them there. The idea of the international support, which was accepted by our membership, it was in the interest of trade unionism that we should have a strong international trade union movement. I'll get a cup of tea, I think.
Yes.
Get one.
How are you doing, Jack? All right? Good to see you. All right, this is my son Patrick. This is the great Jack Jones.
I like that, you.
He's honoured.
I think it's the first time that you had an elected government by people, by the people, that was being overthrown by another authority, by a fascist organisation. And we knew it was a fascist organisation, and that was it. My mother was surprised when I went. She didn't know I'd gone. I was staying with my aunt in Liverpool at the time, and I told Auntie Margaret was going, because I went home one night and I said, I'm going to Spain tomorrow. She said, what for? I said, to join the Republican Army. She said, you know bloody sense, son. She told my mother, and I wrote home and told them, you know, sent them a card from London. Brought up with Jack Jones nearly. Yeah. Used to knew him when he was in Liverpool. When we were in our teens, actually. We used to do a lot of chalking and a lot of meetings, unemployed meetings and dockers meetings. We used to publish the Dockers Bulletin. It was like a little Gestated paper we used to issue for the dockers.
You said lots of bad blood before you can stop.
You're not walking then, Jack? You're not walking?
No, I'd never been abroad before. Never. It was quite an experience, really, you know, to hear people speaking differently and not knowing what they were saying, really. It's only later on you more or less got into the habit, because when we were when I was with the Special Machine Gun Battalion, they were all Spanish. And of course, I had to get along with that, you know, which I didn't do so bad, but they helped me a lot. They were very, very good to me. Very good. And the artillery commandant, he was very good to me. They tried to explain things to me, you know. It didn't bother me at all whether I was just with Spanish people. I was quite happy to be with the Spanish outfit. It was an experience I really enjoyed.
It's not something he talked a lot about. And I think that's common, isn't it? People don't talk about that kind of experience because they would be talking to you about it all your life. But when is an appropriate time to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, I think it's still important.
Why?
I don't know. Just to remember what people did and why they did it, and I just think that's important for them. Yeah. I don't know. I was in Madrid.
When we scattered his ashes on the Ebro.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that was my first outing with the International Brigades sort of group. It was very interesting.
Well, I mean, you always say it would be the equivalent of you going off to fight in Afghanistan. For
No. Going off to Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah.
But fighting with the Viet Cong and not with the Americans.
Of course. One can take that for granted.
Il y a eu près de 500 000 réfugiés qui sont passés entre le 28 janvier 1939 et le 13 février 1939. Donc, les républicains espagnols ont été très très mal accueillis. Les familles ont été envoyées au centre de la France, les enfants, les mères avec les enfants. Et les hommes, les soldats en particulier, ont été envoyés dans des camps de concentration. Je ne sais pas si vous l'ignoriez, mais sur les plages d'Argelès-sur-Mer ont été organisés, mais très très rapidement et improvisés, des camps de concentration.
My first involvement with the International Brigade was when I was 6 years of age, because the village of Llanbrarach, like all the Welsh villages, were collecting food and money and clothes for to send over to Spain and to help the refugees and etc. So Spain has always been lurking in the back of my mind. And then I met Wendy, and then Wendy, while I was with Wendy, she had the first real information about her uncle. Oh, I was so pleased that I was associated with someone whose uncle had fought in Spain.
My uncle was a Jewish Washingtonian, and he understood that if Hitler and Mussolini succeeded in Europe, that they would be next. There were still a number of people still living in the late 80s, early 90s, who knew my uncle, and they knew him to be an exceptional person. He was an athlete, he was a trade union leader, he was a sort of a working class hero. He volunteered to go to Spain, but he didn't tell his mother. He was, like most of them, keeping his destination a secret. He said he was going to Paris for a holiday, but when he asked my mother, what do you want to bring back? She said, just bring yourself back. I didn't know this until I started reading about it, started writing, corresponding with people.
Wendy said, why don't you go and meet your long-lost auntie in Mega? Well, I said, geez, I don't want to go meeting her. She was a shopkeeper, you know. So Wendy insisted I go meet her. So I met her, and we were there talking about the whole family and this, that, and the other. And then, and she said, my brother, Morgan, he kept coming home here, causing trouble. And his son was another bounder. He went to Spain and broke his mother's heart. I said, what? He said, your Uncle Harold went to Spain and broke his mother's heart. I said, how did he do that? He got his bloody self killed, that's what he did, his silly ape. And his mother never recovered from it. And I didn't want to ask any more questions. I just wanted to find out about my Uncle Harold. He didn't go to Spain from Neath in Wales. He went up to Birmingham and joined the International Brigade from Birmingham and then went across to Spain. And he got killed in one of the first battles of the Spanish Civil War in Arama. And so Wendy and I had both our uncles were there, and so Wendy and I got together as well, and we carried on the same struggle for the same ideals and the same principles and same justice. So that's what those two were fighting for.
That's it.
Yep.
Can we start now, please? We're ready to walk down to the memorial to start our ceremony. So, flags at the ready.
There were some brigaders, for example, who just didn't talk at all. My father, but he was never like that. He always talked about it at very great length and in enormous detail. He spoke to me at great length for the first time when I was 15, and he must have thought I was old enough to sort of have some comprehension of what was going on. And in fact, I felt so proud of him. I went into school and told all my friends, and nobody really understood what I was talking about.
I think I probably heard stories from my grandfather when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11. I can't remember exactly.
But I grew up knowing the names of places in Spain as if they were places round the corner from where I lived. So I knew Gandesa, I knew Quinto, I knew Belchite, I knew all these places. They could have been round the corner, but I'd never been there and I didn't know what they looked like or anything. And when I was a teenager, I would say, when you come to my house, whatever you do, don't mention Spain. My father will never stop talking about it. My father's experiences of the war were very different, really, from some of the books that came out a few years ago, written by perhaps the people in command. My father's experience was, and the things that he talked about, were much more sort of the day-to-day things. The cold, the hunger, lack of food.
I wasn't worried about getting enough to eat because we were getting... you think he became from England in the 30s, remember, and there wasn't a lot of food about for ordinary working class people.
It's family in a much wider sense. It's not family, my uncle. It is family in the sense that here are the people who care about the things that I care about, who feel that if you see an injustice, you have to act on it. An extraordinary thing to do.
I thought it would be best to do it in an anniversary year. And what better time to choose than the 70th anniversary? So that is why we've come here today. This route that we're taking today is one of many possible routes that you took when you crossed into Spain during the night. We decided at night was too perilous because we know that some of you never even made it. So conditions were incredibly variable and it was a very hazardous and risky business. Because of that, because of the infiltrators, because of the border guards, the route was constantly being changed about. And so people know, Jack and Bob, they know that people went from somewhere inland of Serre or wherever. So this is one of many possible routes that may have been taken, but I think it has a particular resonance because, as Serge was telling us, this was also the route that exiles took.
And so we began the long and hazardous climb over the Pyrenees. Hazardous because in order to evade the non-intervention patrols, we were unable to use the regular paths. Indeed, at times, we formed a human chain to negotiate particularly rough passages.
We went up a little path and then went down a dark abyss. And remember, this was 11 o'clock at night, no torches allowed and no talking.
This was my first experience of mountainous terrain, and I was surprised to see so much vegetation. Until now, I had not associated trees with mountains. At frequent intervals, a halt was called, and we were able to enjoy a brief rest. During one of those stops, we were provided with a real treat, a nightingale's song.
Oh, I know. That is first.
Already, we've been walking for 2 minutes.
Yo trabajo en una federación de splice que se llama SPLAC, que son splice de ideario laico y progresista, y juntos estamos en un movimiento con otras entidades, algunas también infantiles y juveniles, otras son fundaciones. Y bueno, yo he recibido una fundación que se llama Perardiaca a través del correo internet a SPLAC y me enteré de esta marcha. Y bueno, yo veraneo aquí en Portbou, que tenemos una casita, mis padres, y nada más. Nos queda una hora de camino y pensamos que era una buena manera de hacer una visita cultural, un poco de todo, ¿no?
To be honest, like, young people don't really care. I think I do more than most young people, but not as much as most of the people here. More interesting girls.
For me, my partner David died the previous October. That was the main reason I wanted to commemorate David's journey.
30 years anniversary of my father's death coincides with the 70th anniversary of his going to Spain. It wasn't necessarily approved of in our families. Nobody talked about it. My mother, she was a pacifist all her life, and it didn't matter about causes really, because she just thought people shouldn't go to war for any reason. They were engaged before he went, and he didn't tell her he was going. He didn't tell his own mother. My mother broke off the engagement with him, and only when he came back so very badly injured did she give in, and she married him in 1940, and the result was all of us. So. When we were growing up, we thought it was exciting, and we didn't know then that it would have other meaning for us, but it stands for everything that we believe in. Liberty, equality, education for everyone, workers' rights. Just sad for my dad that he didn't know how much we would have supported him.
The dawn was breaking when we reached the summit, and we sat or lay down for a long breather. What a magnificent panorama. But not for long could I feast my eyes on such beauty, for we had reached the most dangerous part of our climb. Only an hour's journey divided us from Spain, but at any moment with the coming of daylight we might be spotted by the French frontier guards. We resumed our slightly staggering march. The strain was definitely telling on most of the party. This, of course, was not surprising. Many of them had probably never climbed anything higher than the top deck of a bus. Suddenly, the guide pointed to a brown stone and said, "That is Spain." We all raised a cheer. Some of us ran, some of us walked, and some literally crawled on their hands and knees a few yards past this stone and lay exhausted in the shade of a number of large boulders. We had arrived. To this day, I never remember having such a feeling of exaltation.
Two Mancunian vandals, huh?
Ali, this is what we specialise in, breaking down borders.
Social and political, I like to think.
We have to retrace our steps.
No, we don't mind moving fast. It's
Some of us are the movement.
is that what all of us are doing? All going in and coming back?
We're not. No, surely. No, it's going down.
Oh wow!
Okay.
That's the border, guys. That's it.
This is the border.
There's Spain. Viva España.
It's
the border.
So those border stones span the entire Pyrenees from the Mediterranean coast to the Atlantic coast, starting from one on the Mediterranean coast.
Stay there, so we'll have an orange, shall we? Or...
This was our summit, peak of our heart's career. 40 the years Moses trudged willingly to view his Canaan from Mount Nebo's height, while our apocalypse with eager light, red rising sun revealed in ecstasy. What if rash hopes turned ash in burning Spain? Yet we who have climbed up have not climbed in vain.
Alan! Abigail! Group photo!
It's a place that we all know so well. What was there that we gave of our life's blood? And most of our brave comrades fell. We are proud of the British battalion and the stand for Madrid that they made. With the women who fought there beside them in the ranks of the 50th Brigade.
We enter Spain by walking from one field to the next. It will be a short stroll down towards a bar. For the volunteers, it was a long walk to the nearest road, and then they had to get to the fort of San Ferran, where they were mustered before being sent south to train, and all too soon to fight. Reading some of the brigaders' accounts, I am surprised that in some ways this war sounds so much like the First World War. Professional armies lined up in trenches, shooting at each other.
12th of July, another night minus sleep, 4 running. Our crews are practically all in. Had to get the gun back to behind base, which was blown almost to pieces yesterday. All 6 of us digging a dugout a few yards back from the gun, too damn tired to make much headway. And never will I forget the cheerful sod who chose to pause in his labours to say, "We're just digging our own graves."
It had been at least 3 days since any one of us in my company had slept for even a few minutes. The almost total absence of food and water, the energy-sapping marches across rough territory under a ferocious sun, and the constant harassment by the enemy, both on the ground and from the air, meant we were completely drained, physically and mentally.
14th of December. Apparently we're waiting for camiones, trucks, but where we are going, heaven alone knows. I think of all the memories of Spain and of this war, the most vivid and lasting will be these travels. Things often go wrong, but how anyone can organise this mass of humanity and goods as they do beats me. 14th of January. In a field somewhere or other, about 4 kilometres from Teruel. What is happening, nobody seems to know exactly.
So fierce was the fighting, we had no opportunity to gather together our wounded and take them with us. Wally, along with all too many others, had to be left where he fell. If there is anything worse than seeing a dead or horribly wounded man, it is seeing just an arm or a leg ripped off and flung aside by the explosion of a shell.
Well, we're expecting to win, yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't go with the idea of really losing, do you? We thought the whole world would have come behind us, but then it changed completely, didn't it? I mean, they just shut their eyes when Mussolini and Hitler started supplying aircraft and stuff like that. And they put the embargo onto Spain, didn't they? They couldn't go and buy things. I think the world turned against it, really.
The war is often described as one of ideals. Republican supporters talk of a people's war. Did that mean anything for those under fire? Many brigaders went on to fight in the Second World War, and some certainly remark on a difference.
In the Navy, I never felt so divorced from my family, but nor did I feel so close to my comrades. The British Navy was a microcosm of British society, with all of its petty class and status distinctions maintained to the full, especially when it came to relations between officers and other ranks. In Spain, we were all there, not from compulsion, but from choice. Our intimacy was genuine, not contrived, and our commitment to the defeat of fascism was total.
When I reach our next stopping place, I find our group mingling with a big local party doing the kind of things that holidays are for. It makes me think of the letter home written by the volunteers, George Green and his wife Nan.
For us, we shall be glad when it's all over. My idea of a good time is not being shot at, but is connected with growing lettuce and spring onions, and drinking beer in a country pub, and playing quartets with friends, and having my children about me to educate me and keep me human. And we're most of us like that out here.
The respite lasts longer than expected, but the walk is not quite over. The destination is the Jewish Company's monument we visited before.
I'm suggesting you lay your plate in. Jack?
Most of the time we filmed here, we were far apart. At one point, I saw my colleague walk away. Had he had enough of the speeches? Enough of this evocation of the past? He told me afterwards that no, it was because the past became too real. He was thinking of his family and the political divisions which run through it now and probably did then. He knows his grandfather fought with Franco's army. Willingly or forcibly conscripted, he is not sure, as the family doesn't talk about it, and his grandfather is starting to forget. It meant his grandfather might have killed Bob, or Bob his grandfather, and yet what he was feeling at that moment here was gratitude towards Bob. He switched off the camera and went to thank Bob for coming to Spain to fight for a better world, a better future. He switched the camera back on to record the people leaving. The party divides between two countries. Some descend into France and the rest return to Spain. Tomorrow the visit will culminate with the unveiling of a plaque in the fort of San Ferran. Just below the fort of San Ferran is Figueras. For many brigaders, their first Spanish town. It was smaller then, but had a progressive municipal tradition and a graceful centre, until the bombs began to fall. Can those revisiting recognise their Figueras in today's fast-growing centre for tourism and commerce?
Título de esto y tanta cosa de esta.
Pues que yo no sé. No tengo mucho tiempo aquí, por eso no estoy bien informada.
¿Tú eres originariamente de dónde?
Rumanía,
¿Y cómo vienes aquí a trabajar? ¿Por qué España?
porque Rumanía es muy mal.
¿Ah, sí?
Por eso, claro, no tenemos de trabajo ahí. Tenemos, pero paga muy poco y la vida es muy mala, es muy... Son muchos rumanos. Ella también es rumana.
Ah, ¿sí?
Sí.
¿Hay muchos rumanos aquí trabajando?
Sí, aquí en todo España son muchísimos. ¿Bufetes libres? ¿Que trae un café con leche?
Sí, café con leche.
Today, the main tourist attraction is the Dali Museum, built by the painter himself 1 year before Franco died. We have no time to visit, and I feel guilty when he mentions later that Dali is one of his favourite painters, despite Dali's association with Franco. Does a painter's politics matter more than anyone else's? As we wander around, we encounter many foreigners or people who might be foreign, a mix of tourists and those serving the tourists. Are they all beneficiaries of a benevolent Eurocapitalism which has mercifully consigned to the dustbin those conflicts of the 1930s? Will any of these visitors write memoirs? Some of those who stay will inevitably die here. Are they victims of another kind of conflict? Or rational agents of economic progress? For example, the young Russian who served our dinner and took his break to chat with us.
Mi padre es, en principio de profesión, ¿vale? Es ingeniero nuclear. Ahora te vas a quedar más de piedra todavía. Mi padre es actor de ópera.
¿Actor?
De ópera. De cantante, ¿sabes? O sea, fíjate, ¿no? En la evolución de Homo sapiens, ingeniero nuclear, actor de ópera, camarero.
When one came straight from England, the aspect of Barcelona was something startling and overwhelming. It was the first time I had ever been in a town where the working class was in the saddle.
This was the reaction of the writer George Orwell, who arrived in Barcelona at the end of 1936. Since I read these words as a teenager, I'd always wanted to see that city. Now there was a chance. When we reached Barcelona, we felt more acutely than in Figueras. That memory was entangled in present questions. Now the stylish post-Olympic infrastructure surrounds those streets where, in the films of 1936, militias drive up and down in their commandeered trucks. The militias may linger only as black and white images, but there is again an international presence linked with the hunger for a better life. Do any of these hopeful traders know that Nehru and other leaders of the Indian independence struggle thought the fate of Spain so important that they travelled here to show solidarity with the Republic?
¿Habla español? ¿Todos sois de Bangladesh? Sí, no, mucho, no. Bangladesh, Pakistán, India. De Bangladesh. Bangladesh. Si la policía viene aquí, yo corre bien. Corre. Visto policía, no pasa nada. Yo policía va abajo, yo corre mucho. Si policía corre, tú corres. Si él no corre, tú no corres. Policía visto mirando, no pasa nada. ¿Vive mucha gente junta en la casa? No, hay poquito. Sí, pero tú vives con él.
In a warehouse overlooking this informal market, they are putting up an exhibition of posters from the time of the Republic. Orwell mentions them.
Flaming from the walls in clean reds and blues that made the few remaining advertisements look like daubs of mud.
I am surprised how they still have the power to move me, even when the style has been normalised as the visual clichés of dead revolutions. How startling these images must have seemed at a time when women in France didn't have the vote, and in England had obtained it only after years of struggle. Looking at them now, I am more struck by a remarkably modern-seeming concern for the environment. It's a reminder that there are competing organisations offering multiple visions of the future. The cause of the Republic's defeat? Or a reason to mourn that defeat? Would those bitter fights within the Spanish left have been played out differently if democratic Europe had backed the government against the generals? We have seen some of these initials outside the museum. Most insistent has been that of the CNT, the anarchist trade union which rallied to the defence of Barcelona in 1936. We search out its local headquarters, thinking to ask its today's activists about their heritage. They tell us, but in a different way.
Aquí dentro de todo, o sea, no se critica. Aquí se habla de conciliar el pasado y conciliar a los oprimidos con los opresores. En Argentina lo que se intenta y lo que se ha hecho, decir, no, los opresores fueron unos hijos de puta. Y hay que luchar contra eso. Y en cambio aquí no, aquí se habla más de conciliar, entonces aquí hay más yo siento esto, yo siento una especie de inmovilismo social en cuanto si quieren aplicar medidas opresoras, como decir, o como están haciendo ahora con la flexibilidad laboral, no hay un apareo, no hay un grupo de gente muy poderoso, claro, que se le puede hacer frente como puede ser en Francia.
Allá en Ecuador van los empresarios aquí a contratar personal. Cuando tú llegas aquí, ves la realidad. A medida que va pasando el tiempo, te van presionando más. Te presionan. Tienes que echar... Y a medida que van cogiendo confianza y ves que tú no reaccionas, te oprimen. Pero si ya no ven que tú no respondes, a la calle. Somos como material desechable para ellos.
Primero, Mercadona muchas veces se ha tratado como una empresa modélica, porque aquí se critica mucho que la estabilidad laboral, que no haya contratos fijos, y Mercadona es una empresa que a todos los trabajadores los tiene fijos.
Entre comillas, porque el contrato fijo no sirve para nada.
Claro, eso al fin y al cabo, si te quieren echar, te echan igual, o sea, te pagan la indemnización y listo. O sea, tampoco es un problema. La familia del dueño es un grupo muy poderoso. O sea, y entonces, nosotros, cuando vamos con ellos, los medios intentan de...
¿Quién es la familia? ¿Quiénes son?
Son los Roig. O sea, el dueño de Villarreal, del club Villarreal, sí, el hermano es el dueño de Mercadona. Además son dueños también de empresas de cerámica, También han sido accionistas y presidentes del Club Valencia, y también son dueños del Club de Básquet de Pamesa Valencia, y también es presidente de la Asociación de Empresas Familiares también, y bueno, tienen ciertos cargos que son de relevancia pública, o sea, salen mucho en la televisión por diferentes motivos. Y además está el tema de que para ellos y para los medios de comunicación también, bueno, para la mayoría de lo que sería el establishment dentro de España, tener a un pueblo callado y obediente es lo mejor. Y mostrar a personas que están luchando y que están defendiendo sus intereses, eso no les interesa demasiado, y van a mostrar lo menos posible para tampoco que queden que no saben nada.
Civil War was very much, in a sense, a fight of the trade unions, of workers anyway, for their rights.
And all of these struggles being connected is a very, very important thread, I think throughout all of our motivations, isn't it? You're not just fighting for yourself, but also for all the people of the world.
Because Wendy and I are internationalists, we've joined the United Nations Association, and they wanted to do this International Day of Peace. It's going to be a very, very important day, particularly with all the struggles going on throughout the world, in Afghanistan, Iraq, in Palestine. And so we set it up. Now, I befriended Mozambique, who was incarcerated in Guantanamo Bay for 3 years, in a previous meeting. So I thought one of the most important things to introduce at the UN was Mozambique. We wanted Mozambique to come there, and it turned out to be a very, very, very successful event. And as I say, my main motivation for it is, again, making the links between the struggles that we're having today and the struggles that our uncles had and the International Brigades had for peace and justice.
Because no one can be free until all are free, as it says on the monument that we put up in Cardiff.
Lo and behold, the police rang me up and said, Ray, they said, there's been a fire and there's been an accident with the monument. They said a big gang of BNP came there with a lorry load of pallets, wooden pallets.
This is opposite the police station.
Right, and it was right opposite the police station. They put it all around the monument, set fire to the pallets there, and rushed down there the following morning with Wendy. And there was our monument standing in all its glory, with just one chunk of stone had come away. But the burning itself reminded us the fascists are still there.
The other monuments within the Peace Garden, there's a monument to World War I and so on. I think ours is quite a strong statement to say that this is about people and this is about democracy. It's not about war.
It is more arduous to honour the memory of the nameless than that of the renowned. We have argued about these words of the German philosopher Walter Benjamin since Portbou, were they engraved on his memorial. He died there, perhaps killed himself, in 1940 trying to escape the Nazis. I object that the quotation is pretentious. People don't have to be renowned to have names and be honoured by those who know them. He argues this is not the point. The point is to honour people in coming together. Too many to be named. To act together to make democracy mean what it says. The rule of the people.
You had a lot of people coming voluntarily to fight for democracy, and it's never been done before. There was Italians, there was Bulgarians, there were Germans, there were French, there were Americans, there were Canadians, the Cubans, the Australia, New Zealand, Morocco and places like that. I mean, you look at the war in Iraq, there was over 50% of the people in this country opposed the war. Well, where was your democracy then what Tony Blair talks about? Because we haven't got democracy here. In this country, we are just a type of democracy, but you've got now that the government's deciding things at cabinet level and pushing it through. There's no discussion going on anywhere. But it's a matter of democratic support. We elect the government, but we give them too much power.
You can't do anything else other than organise to resist what's going on if it's wrong. That's what trade unions do. I mean, sometimes they're defeated. It doesn't mean that you say, oh, well, we'll pack up and go home then. People have been organising in this way. And the Chartists, you might say, the Chartists were defeated. But if you take the long view, just about all of the 6 points of the Charter came about.
So who's been at the forefront of every single campaign? In Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bob Doyle, aged 92, is always there.
You can't say that there's no point, because people would be in an even worse position.
Todos está aquí y te presentarle a Jack Jones, brigadista.
Well, thank you very much, comrades and friends. It's, in a sense, sad but a pleasure for those of us who fought in the International Brigade and came here at an early stage and participated in the battle to try to keep Spain free from fascism. Speaking for myself, I'm very pleased to be here, glad to be alive, glad to see the progress that is being made here in Spain under progressive governments and the progressive socialist and Labour and socialist and communist parties, all combined together to try to ensure that Spain remains free and a democratic republic, and we are a democratic country, a republic. Anyway, thanks very much for coming today, and keep your support going for those of us who fought for the republic and still believe in the principles on which we fought then, and hopefully still today, in a better world, a more socialist country, and not only in Spain, but all over the world. Progress for the working people. That's what we're fighting for, and I'm proud to see all of you here today. Well
Y ahora la revelación de la placa.
The República! ¡Viva la República! ¡No pasarán! ¡Pasaremos!
We came because our open eyes could see no other way, Cecil Day Lewis.